to take the time to introduce our newest faculty member in Weed Science, Dr. Talia Humphries. And I'm actually going to let her do most of the introduction herself.
Sure.
So when you're ready, Talia.
Thank you. Okay, welcome back, everybody. Thank you, Joe, for inviting me to speak to you guys today and for this opportunity to introduce myself. So yes, I started with the Plant Sciences Department 4 months ago, and my position is in noxious and invasive species management, specifically in natural ecosystems. So with a specific interest even further again in grassland communities. So today, to help me kind of like express what my research is about, I'm going to sort of lean towards this review paper that I published in Landscape Degradation and Development, titled Weed Management for Landscape Scale Restoration of Global Temperate Grasslands. I prepared this review paper to provide some insight on how management actions are used throughout the world to help control not only weeds and manage them in natural areas, but also to understand how we can simultaneously bring back ecosystem services to degraded grassland communities. So humans are totally dependent on highly functioning ecosystems. These ecosystems provide us with important areas for food and for food production, raw materials, and clean air and water. Though rapid human expansion has resulted in the degradation of a lot of these ecosystem services and caused a lot of significant global changes in a really short, rapid amount of time. This includes altered disturbance regimes, the spread of invasive plants and animals, disruptions to ecosystem connectivity, and altered land uses, as well as disruptions to biogeochemical cycles such as the CO2 cycle. These changes are having direct negative impacts on global biodiversity and ecosystem functioning, which then goes straight back into degrading our ecosystem services, diminishing basically our quality of life. So this figure here was taken from my review paper, and it is a very conservative estimate of total loss of temperate grasslands by country or region. And I would say, yeah, this is still a significant amount of our temperate grasslands have been completely degraded, and I would say that this nowadays is significantly higher amounts again. So it's not all doom and gloom. There are some strategies that we can now implement through conservation efforts to mitigate these degradations. This includes improving our management of natural resources and the restoration of degraded ecosystems to restore function that will then cycle back to a positive biodiversity, ecosystem function, and services for our livelihoods. So when I discuss landscape degradation, what I am talking about is the movement of a functional ecosystem into a degraded state. This figure here, taken from Sitting and Hobbs, shows 3 different pathways that this degradation can occur. And from that, 3 different pathways that degradation of a landscape can occur. The top and middle row here both show the same thing, just one is in 3-dimensional, one is in 2-dimensional, and the bottom arrow here shows some different factors that can either move an ecosystem towards a intact, highly functional state, or as described here as an assemblage 1, or towards that degraded state, dependent on what is happening with those factors. So basically what is important to emphasize here is that these state changes, and a state is represented basically, if you look at the middle one, by a rectangle. So each of these states are actually really difficult to alter without persistent and pretty dramatic disturbance events. The reason for this is that within each of these rectangles, there are internal feedback loops that are allowing this system to be functioning and resilient to change, which is why when we move to these degraded states, weeds are usually the drivers of that degraded state. So for instance, this is what a feedback loop that facilitates cheatgrass invasion looks like. So you go from your native ecosystem, which is in a functional high state, and some type of disturbance happens that weakens the ecosystem's resilience, allowing for cheatgrass to start to move into the ecosystem. Over time, wildfire disturbance regimes are increased, which facilitate cheatgrass and usually negatively impact your native ecosystem. And this also promotes further cheatgrass germination, as there is also less competition after the wildfires for them to grow and spread really, really well. And then this ends up becoming a cheatgrass dominant cycle and is really, really difficult to break and restore. So for context, this is what it would actually look like. This is a cheatgrass dominant state with cheatgrass as a basic monoculture as far as the eye can see. So what we wanted to identify in the review paper is how can we break down these feedback loops and replace them with ones that favor the native communities. So this is where ecological restoration meets weed management. Again, my review paper was more a traditional style review, but our search requirements were limited to the English language, and the selected literature had to include a field-based ecological restoration. B, it had to be a study conducted within a temperate grassland community. And C, there had to be a manipulation and measurement of the standing vegetation in the attempt to facilitate a target species. So when I say target species, I refer to any species that was favorable or the goal of the given paper. Okay, so it could be pasture improvement, it could be biodiversity improvement, anything along those lines. And then for our search terms, we included the word ecological restoration plus one of temperate grasslands or any variation of what a temperate grassland could be called, plus weeds, invasive plants, or exotic plants. As far as the effect of the treatments observed, we gave them either a high, moderate, or low ranking, with a high effect being described as significant improvements in weed control and the target species establishment, with moderate being a significant improvement in one or the other, and low being no significant changes observed. Okay, sorry, that's been some error in translation. Okay, so this table is taken from my review paper as well, and here we have a list of all the different papers that were selected for the review process. And we have this categorized by author, location, the journal it was published, how long the study was implemented and monitored for, the leading degrading pressures that were described by the authors in each paper, as well as the treatment combinations and their effect. So from this, we observed that the top degrading pressures as recorded by the authors were number one, exotic plants. Secondly was agriculture, and this stems more from like past history of the site. So in a lot of the cases, they were looking to restore abandoned agricultural lands. And then 3 was a tie between altered grazing and fire regimes. And secondly, the most frequently used control actions for grassland restorations were seeding, mowing or clipping, and a tie between physical soil manipulation and herbicide use. Okay, so firstly what I want to show here is the effect of using 1, 2, 3, or 4 treatments in integration with each other. So what is important to see here is we have the effect of the treatment on your Y and then the number of treatments used on your X. And highly effective treatments are the light gray, the no effect treatments are the dark gray, and ones that saw one or the other change are in that middle color there. So what's important to emphasize here for restoration of grasslands and achieving those restoration goals, when using just one treatment, we never really hit both like weed management goals and the establishment of the target species. Though, as soon as you start integrating 2, 3, or even 4 treatments, that is significantly improved. Secondly, we just wanted to compare the effect of how effective herbicide was in improving the integrated treatment. So in the first column, we have the effect of integrated treatments that did not include herbicide. And about 40% of those treatments did observe like highly significant effective changes. Though with the inclusion of herbicide, this was increased to about 60%. Finally, we just wanted here to see the effect of using herbicide with a fire treatment. So this combination, with or without other treatments as well, was almost always highly effective at restoring our restoration targets. Versus, and that's for instance, just to compare, just fire without a herbicide. It could include other treatments, but very similar to restoration efforts that did not include a herbicide, very broad across the scale of the literature. Okay, so as a conclusion to my review paper, we developed this broad management strategy recommendation, which includes a 5-step process. Firstly, we need to make efforts to reduce or remove weed biomass, and that includes standing and seed bank targeting as well. If necessary, we have to manipulate the soil. So this comes into place specifically when soil is highly, like nutrient levels are highly elevated, which does facilitate invasive feedback loops. Third step is to incorporate revegetation of native propagules. This is particularly important in areas that are isolated from source populations and in areas where weeds have dominated for extensive periods of time. It is very, very unlikely that there is native seed bank for natural regeneration. So bringing back propagules is vital for achieving the second part of our review aims. Step 4 was to implement site-specific grazing management. And then 5, down the line, it's really important to start thinking about strategic restoration, like restoring pockets of land that can generate these ecological corridors and generate large-scale, like landscape-scale connectivity. And then finally, these recommendations, obviously, no 2E grasslands are the same, specifically degraded grasslands. So they are dependent on these three main factors, which is firstly, the dominant weeds in the system. We need to really understand what their biology and ecological factors are that are driving their dominance, and what strategies we can use that can break those cycles. Step 2 is site history. So this includes, if possible, knowing what the site looked like before it moved into a degraded state, and then understanding what is holding the system obviously in a degraded state now and how to mitigate that, but then also thinking about the future. What services do we want from this ecosystem can really guide what type of restoration we want to implement. And then step 3 is the reintroduction of grazing should be determined by the rate of recovery. So with that, my research aims to adopt strategies highlighted in my review paper here as part of my research program moving forward, where I basically aim to target weeds across North Dakota and also study weeds at the more global scale in order to help improve ecosystem services in grasslands.